is a great time to get all your friends over to celebrate. It could be something simple like a Saturday afternoon, or like my family, it seems like half of us have a birthday in the month of July. So let's get some recipes ready to celebrate for any occasion. We're gonna get our first side dish going right off the bat because once we get it all mixed together, we wanna give it time to chill back down in the refrigerator. So I'm gonna start by making an avocado and corn salad. So I'm gonna start with my dressing and I'm going to put 3 tablespoons of olive oil in there to get my base going. And then to kind of thin it down just a smidgen, I wanna add a tablespoon of water to that. The next thing I'm gonna do is add some sweetness to all of this, and I'm gonna do that with a teaspoon of honey. If you want, you can skip this step, but I just think it does a nice job of kind of just adding a little yumminess to it. So we've got that teaspoon of honey in there. Then the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna season this because right now it wouldn't be the most exciting flavors with just the olive oil and the honey. It gives us a nice base, but we're gonna kick it up with a teaspoon of Italian seasoning. Now, if you don't have Italian seasoning, you can do 1/3 of a teaspoon of each of basil and thyme, and you could throw in some oregano in there and build that teaspoon up that way if you're not a fan of kind of those pre-mixed seasonings. Then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add some acid to it, and I'm gonna do that by adding a lime. And so I'm just gonna squeeze that to get that juice going. And if you're a person that has bottled lime juice, you wanna have just about a tablespoon of lime juice. And I should have a nice juicy lime here, so I'm just gonna, juicy. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna squeeze this in, and my 2 halves of my lime should give me that tablespoon. It doesn't need to be exact, but usually if you get a nice ripe lime, you're gonna get about a tablespoon of juice. And like I'm doing here, you can just squeeze it and get that juice out and in. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna whisk this together so that I get an actual dressing start to form. So now I've got my beautiful dressing. You can see it's a creamier texture now that we've combined everything. I'm gonna simply add all of my ingredients. So what I have is I have 1.5 cups of corn here. You can use frozen corn if you want to, and I've just let this sit out for a little while to thaw. Or you can get fresh corn because right now you're getting into sweet corn season. If you do go with fresh corn, or even if you go with frozen corn, you can quickly just cook this in some butter on your stove if you want to give it some extra flavor. It's not necessary, but it's an option for you, especially if you're working with that fresh corn. So like I said, I have 1.5 cups of corn, and I'm gonna add that into my bowl. Then the next thing I'm gonna add is I have 1/2 cup of cucumber, and what I've done is I've just cut it into these little wedge-sized pieces. That way they're nice and fork friendly. When you're making a salad like this, you really wanna think about what's a smart way to add all of those ingredients when you're mixing it together with your fork. Then what I have here is I have about 1/2 cup of cherry tomatoes, and what I did is I sliced my cherry tomatoes in half just like this. That way you're not trying to into a full tomato. So I'm gonna mix that in, or actually add that to the top. Then what I've done is I have some basil. This is 2 tablespoons of basil that I've just kind of given a small chop to. I'm gonna toss that in. And then the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add some avocados. Now, if avocados are something that you don't use a lot, when you're picking an avocado in the store, you might think of an avocado as this green fruit, and so you look for this bright green avocado in there. You want it to get a little dark, and when you push on it, there's a little bit of a give to it. Otherwise, it's gonna be too hard to eat and enjoy because it's not ripe enough. So there's this thing that maybe you've heard about before called avocado hand and bagel hand, where people try and rush through this whole cutting process and they end up cutting their hand because you have to get your hand so close to so many places while you're cutting it. So you want to be careful. And see, what I've done is I've just sliced it in half. This one's perfectly ripe, so that means that avocado pit will fall right out. I know some people will actually plant these and hope for avocado trees, but I have no idea how long it takes. Mine's just gonna go in the trash. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gently gonna run my knife through, and I'm going to cut it up into these really nice small bite-sized pieces again. When you're thinking about cutting all of your pieces, think about that size of that cherry tomato that you've cut in half. Really, your cherry tomato is going to be that biggest piece that you have in there. The rest, you want it to be smaller than those pieces of that cherry tomato. So kind of use that cherry tomato as your guide as you're going through. So while I've been talking about all these cuts and all these bite-sized pieces, what I've done is I've simply cut a grid into my avocado. Now in order to get it out, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take just a regular tablespoon like you'd use at your table, hence the name, and I'm just going to come along the edge and I'm going to cut, this out, and I'm just going to scoop it into my bowl. And I'm going to get these nice little dices of avocado. Now they're going to cling together because avocado is a pretty fatty fruit. So what I'm going to do is just gently take my hands and slide these pieces apart, and then you can see as it comes apart, I've got these nice little bite-sized pieces. If you wanted to, you could do this on your cutting board before you add them in, but I don't mind getting my hands in there and getting a little bit dirty. So like I said, I'm gonna do this with my 2 avocados. Now that I have all of my pieces in here with my avocado, corn, tomatoes, cucumber, I'm going to gently stir it to combine all of this goodness together. Now I'm just gently tossing this right now, and you'll know that that dressing is starting to cover everything when you start to see those little flickle-fleckles from that dressing with that Italian dressing mix that or I should say that Italian seasoning that we added into our dressing. So you can see it looked pretty green just a moment ago, but now doing this gentle stir to put it all together, we've got some corn in there. Now the very last big ingredient that we're going to add is some feta cheese, and I've got another half a cup of feta cheese. I wanted to give it a first round stir because feta cheese is a light cheese that's in these crumbles, and if you stir it too much, you can see it just flakes right apart in your hand. So I want to add this at the very last little bit, because now I'm going to gently stir, and I'm going to try and keep those curds of my feta cheese intact, just like so. But I want to get it mixed throughout so that with each scoop, somebody gets a little bit of feta cheese in their portion of the salad. So the last thing that I'm going to do before I finish my little stir is give it a couple cracks of salt. I'll leave salt and pepper on my table so that people can add to it as they so choose. But putting that salt in there now is going to bring out the flavors in that dressing, just with that gentle stir, just like so. And I'm gonna pop that in my refrigerator to bring all of those flavors together. Our main dish, which is gonna blow your socks off, is a marinated New York strip steak. Now it's marinated, so let's talk about what's going into this marinade. When I make my marinades, I like to start them in a glass measuring cup just because then I can really pour it nice and equal over my meat when it comes to marinating. So I have a half a cup of soy sauce in here right now, and to that I'm going to add 3 tablespoons of just regular yellow mustard. You can do Dijon if you want to, but you really don't need the fancy pancery with already using the soy sauce. You'll get a nice mixture of flavors. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to stir and break down that mustard so it becomes one with the soy sauce. And now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of brown sugar to get some sweetness in there. So it's kind of like we're building a really simple barbecue sauce to marinate our meat in. So let's talk about this whole New York strip steak. If you've never bought one before, you might get a little bit of sticker shock when it comes to picking out that piece of meat, because depending on the size of that steak you get, each steak is going to be anywhere from maybe $7 up to $18, $19, $20, depending on the size and the quality that you get. So when you buy this steak, you're gonna see that there's a lot of meat marbling in it. So you can see that fat wrapping through there is gonna give it that extra flavor, and you're paying that extra money for that fat to have it kind of running in and out throughout the meat. So you're not gonna wanna trim anything away. But remember, I said this is for something really special. All of these items that we're cooking are for something special tonight. And actually, we're filming on my dad's birthday, so we're gonna have this as part of his special birthday dinner. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna keep it simple. I'm gonna put a little bit of salt and a little bit of pepper on there, just like so. I'm gonna take this and then I'm gonna transfer it over into a 9 by 13 baking dish. And then I'm gonna put it salt and pepper side down into my baking dish, just like so. And I've kind of got a variety of sizes here. That's the nice thing about grilling, is I can take them off when they're done. And so I know we've got some big eaters coming and some not so big eaters coming. So now I'm just gonna crack some pepper on this side and just a smidgen of salt again. And give one more quick stir. And I'm just simply going to gently pour this over the top, and it's gonna be really nice and dark with that soy sauce. So I wanna try my best with my pouring to cover up as much as I can of the top. Now, you'll notice these are spread out pretty far in this pan and that you're covering that whole 13-inch space on the bottom. So here's how this marinade works. Because I'm not submerging the meat in there, in 15 minutes, I'm gonna flip it, and I'm gonna flip it, and I'm gonna flip it, and I'm gonna marinate this for 45 minutes, flipping it every 15 minutes. So it's time to start that 45-minute counter, and the next time I see you, we're gonna be standing right by my grill. So we've been marinating now, so now we're ready to pop it on the grill. So I started my grill out on high to really bring that temperature up, and now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna drop this down a little bit lower, and I'm just going to take out each steak with my tongs, and what I wanna do is when I pick it up, I just want to give it a little shake so I don't get that sugar trail across my grill. And I want to lay it, and I want that sizzle, because that sizzle is going to be what gives me those grill marks. So we're going to drip off the drops. We're going to lay it down. Going to drip off the drops. Lay it down. And lay it down. So when it comes to this steak, really it's up to you for your desired doneness. So you're gonna kind of watch it, you're gonna take your temperatures, however you're comfortable doing that. I'm a meat thermometer person myself, and when it seems right for me to flip, I'm going to flip it. I'm gonna wait until it totally loosens off my grill grates, because that's gonna let me know that the outside layer of that meat is totally cooked. It's going to release nice and clean, and then I can flip it to finish cooking on the next side. So we're gonna let that cook, and when we are ready to flip, we're gonna do our flip. It is time to move on to our dessert. We've got a salad in there chilling, we've got our meat marinating, getting ready for the grill. So let's start thinking about dessert while we wait for things to get going for dinner. So we're gonna do that with this berry pineapple dessert salad. So the first thing we need to do is we need to make what's called a simple syrup. So I've got a burner over here and I've got a small saucepan. I'm gonna start by taking 3 tablespoons of water, and I'm gonna put that in there. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm gonna add 3 tablespoons of sugar. So I want equal parts of water to equal parts of sugar. So what I'm gonna do is I'm whisking that together, and you can see that that breaks down, and now I have that combined. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to start flavoring this concoction or syrup with some cinnamon. So I have 1/8 teaspoon of cinnamon, and I'm gonna sprinkle that. And then I'm gonna stir, stir, stir. This is gonna give me some of that flavoring in with my simple syrup. And now the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna add my second flavor, and I'm gonna do that with some ginger. So I have a nice flat surface to work with, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna peel my ginger, and for that, people talk about using a spoon. So what I'm gonna do is grab my spoon, and I'm just going to gently pull back, and you're gonna see that that skin of my ginger starts to come off. If this is one of those things that's tricky for you, because to be honest, I'm not the greatest at this, and it's taken a while to even get this pathetically good. So what I'm gonna do is, if I wanna save myself some time, I could just get a larger piece of ginger and cut that skin out. But if you wanna make the most of it, what you do is use this and kind of turn your spoon into a vegetable peeler. A vegetable peeler doesn't really work for this because you have all those little nooks and crannies that you're working your way through, and you'd run the risk of cutting yourself because of the shape that you have here. So a spoon does a nicer job when it comes to taking off that skin. I'm going to add this in, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this with a steeping method. So I want pretty nice sized chunks in that I want to be able to easily find them again when I'm done cooking, because I'm going to have to take all of this out before I actually add it to my fruit. So I've got, I don't know, half a dozen pieces or so. So I'm gonna make sure I've got no more skin in there. If you end up getting skin in there, then you're gonna have to run it through a sieve. But if you have nice clean pieces of ginger like I have here, I will just be able to pick those out just with a spoon. So now I have everything combined in there, and what I wanna do is I wanna bring this up to a boil, and as soon as I get to a boil and everything's nice and smooth, I'm gonna totally turn off the heat. So now I can see that I've got everything nice and boiled here. So I'm just gonna give it one more quick whisk around, and then I'm gonna totally turn this off. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna steep my simple syrup. My plan here is to just simply move this off the heat, and I'm gonna let this sit for 20 minutes. That way the flavor of that ginger is gonna come into all of that liquid, and I'm gonna get a really nice balance of cinnamon and ginger and sugar. So we'll check on that in 20. Our simple syrup has come down to room temperature, and we need it at room temperature because we're going to start mixing our fruit in. If it was still warm, it might run the risk of cooking the fruit, and we don't want that to happen. We want it to stay this nice, fresh, and light dessert salad. So with this, we need to start with a pineapple. Now, pineapples taste so much better when you buy the whole pineapple. You can do canned with this if you want, but it will make a world of difference if you can go fresh. So people get kind of worried about picking their pineapple. Now, this is not a beautiful looking pineapple. You don't, in my opinion, have to go with the most beautiful looking pineapple. Instead, I do the leaf test. I read this on the internet a long, long time ago, and I've done some exploring. And what you want to do is just grab that center leaf and just barely pull, and if it comes out whoop right away on its own, you know this pineapple is optimum ripeness. If you've got a little bit of a tug there, that means there's a little bit to go. So if you're gonna be using your pineapple day of when you go to the store, look for one where you can just quickly go into the middle. Oh, that one came out really easy, and just grab one of those leaves. If it's gonna be a couple days, then you maybe don't want it to come out as quickly. I also have a pineapple slicer here. If you've never used a pineapple slicer before, on there you've got these little different numbers. So when you line it up, you wanna look at, when I stick this in to start slicing my pineapple, I'm gonna go to a level 2, and then that'll let me know I've sliced to the very bottom. So let's talk about how you're gonna get into that pineapple. Now, eventually I'll need this little paring knife, but that's gonna be kind of a chore to get through there. So I'm gonna head over to my knife block. And I actually like using a bread knife to saw into this the very first time. I'm just gonna cut that top off. And now what I have in here, if you've never cut a pineapple before, you have that big hard core. You want to avoid giving this to someone to eat because it's gonna be gross. So what I'm gonna do is I've got a tube in the bottom, or a hole in this makes this tube, and I'm gonna line that up with the core of my pineapple, and I'm gonna gently twist it in. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna keep rotating this, and that's gonna start actually slicing my pineapple. So if you've ever gotten a can of pineapple in a store before and you've had it come out in that big ring, they have something very similar to that in that pineapple factory to slice up that pineapple. So I'm just gonna keep twisting until I get down as far as I need to. So I've got my pineapple sliced pretty much all the way down to the bottom. So now what I'm gonna do is just pull straight up, and I've got a ring of pineapple. And in here, I've actually got a bunch of juice, and you can save this. We're not gonna use it for this recipe, but we've got some juice there. You can drink it. You can mix that in with some other recipes. This is really good too if you're gonna make a ham and you wanna just pour that over the top to give some sweetness to it. And then this is garbage, or sometimes people will save this for a centerpiece, or you can make sometimes some fruity drinks that you can put inside of there. So we'll just put both of those to the side for right now. So now I'm just gonna work on slicing up my pineapple. So I'm gonna pop the top off, just press that little button, and now I'm just gonna pull this. So with a smaller knife, I don't wanna go in with my bread knife. I wanna make just little wedges of pineapple. And you can see it comes out and just bloop, 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 bloop. And now I've got all these little pieces of pineapple right in here. I want to have them be nice bite-sized pieces. Remember, we're always looking for what's going to be the best on somebody's fork if that's how they're eating your food, whether it be part of your main meal or your dessert. The next thing that I'm going to do is I've got my pineapple under control, but now remember it's a pineapple berry dessert salad. So I'm going to come in with my strawberries, and all I'm going to do is cut off my tops. I've already washed them, and then slice it in half, and that's all I want because then it's about the same size as those pineapple chunks. So slice the top, go in half, drop her in the bowl. Now, sometimes you're gonna come across these really large strawberries, and when that happens, you maybe don't wanna just go half. So then what I like to do is half and then quarter, and now I've got pieces that are more of that fork-friendly bit that we're looking for. Now, thinking this through, you've got this dessert salad going on. You could have this plain, and with that sugar syrup on there, this is gonna be a delicious little end to your meal. If you wanted to though, this works great if you put it on top of some vanilla ice cream. It also is really nice if you want to cut the pieces even smaller. You could even put it on sponge cake, or like an angel food cake would work as well. Now the last part's really super simple. I always save my blueberries for last. I'm just gonna add these into my bowl, and now I simply come in with a spoon or a spatula, and I'm just gonna slowly start tossing these together. I don't wanna bruise my feet. I don't wanna bruise my fruit, so I'm gonna stir this together gently, and you're going to know that this is really nice and well covered when your fruit starts to look glossy, because then that means that that sugar syrup is coming all up over that, and you're gonna get that nice cinnamon and ginger. So there we have it. Super simple, super easy, and a fantastic way to end this meal. And speaking of that meal, let's see what everything looks like all together. We are in for a treat with this feast. We've got our cool and crisp and delicious corn and avocado salad. We have our fresh off the grill New York strip steak, and we have our delicious pineapple and berry dessert salad. But then again, there's also this sneak attack over here. We've got some mashed potatoes. You might have your own special recipe for making mashed potatoes, but it's the perfect accompaniment to this main dish extravaganza. If you want to see my twist on mashed potatoes, I'm sharing my mom's recipe on the Aprons Optional Facebook page as a special treat this month. The nice thing is, you can make these potatoes up to 6 months in advance and store them in your freezer. It's a good tip and trick if you're looking for a way to make your Thanksgiving simpler too. So remember, the apron's optional, but the flavor isn't. We have our fresh off the grill flank steak. No, I've only been calling it New York strip steak. And then I jam my finger into the salad.
And that's a wrap.
Awesome.